Hello, Legend of the Samurai here with another Japanese high pin count dimple lock. This one is the Aegis cylinder. This is a 3-row lock, has left, top, and right rows, and there are 6 pins in each row for a total of 18. And while this is another relatively low-cost replacement cylinder in the Japanese market, they do use security drivers in every single chamber, and there are a couple of other quirks that make it a little tricky to pick. So, first I will be using 2 pieces for tensioning, one for actual tension, and a second piece, just a little piece of brass the width of the keyway, is going to prevent the lock from self-destructing as we start to turn this. And that will become important in a bit. So because this is a very crowded lock, I'm going to start with this very, very tiny flag, go over the left row and see if I can set the top pins. There's 1 and 2. 3, 4, 5, and 6. I don't think I overset anything, so I'll switch to another hook, or a flag, sorry. On the right side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 and 5 dropped back, but I think they're good now. Switch to the other side flag and go to the left side. 1 is good. 2 needed a tiny nudge. 3, 4, and it looks like I hit 5 and 6 while I was working on the top row. So, now the fun part. The left and right rows are perfectly opposing each other, which means if you turn this plug 180 degrees, it will relock, but only on the left and right rows. That positions the open keyway directly on top of all of the top row drivers and springs, and if you don't have a packing piece there, they will just fall out into the keyway, and you want to be very careful how you're tensioning this, because if your tensioner slips here, all of those drivers and springs will fall out into the keyway, and it will be a problem. Alright, so make sure everything's locked up. Then I will go in. There's 1 on the left, 2, got 3, 4, 5, 6, and check the right. 1, 2, looks like 3 was all we needed. And then here is another important point for this piece. It has to be the full length of the keyway, because on the back right side there is a ball bearing detent on a pretty hefty spring, and so it will try to escape into the keyway as you go past it if you don't have a packing piece. So there we are, full circle. Pull these out. And now take it apart. Alright, so back comes off, and then we have what's essentially a little key and knob cylinder in a holder. It comes out, and This one is decidedly easy to gut, just straight from the factory, because these caps slide off the front, and they even thoughtfully put these little pieces under them to prevent the springs from going everywhere. So, take out these springs. Alright, so here's what our key pins look like. They are all standard with a little bit of a restriction at the bottom to keep them from falling into the keyway. And then all of our drivers are completely identical. They're these tiny little spools. And that is, in fact, a very clever design for this lock because they are exactly the right height. They are just tall enough to block the shear line on the zero lift pins. And even on the maximum lift pins, they still start off in the belly of the spool. And one of the sort of anti-pick measures, in addition to them being spools, is that height, because it means that they can tilt almost completely sideways in the chambers, and you get a huge amount of counter rotation out of them. And they do, in fact, use them in every single chamber. Let's see. Here is that larger spring for the ball bearing detent. There's that ball bearing. right. Now, see if I can get this clip off the back. I use a rather aggressive C-clip. So this is actually a gentler one that I've replaced it with. The original one is slightly further around and takes at least 2 tools to pry off of there. Alright, so here is our plug. This is a low-cost cast plug, which means the chambers are all split, except right down at the very inner margin. They've done their warding with 2 pressed-in little pins to constrict the keyway a little bit. And then they have these ball bearings pressed into the front for drill protection. And then over here is that little divot where the ball bearing rides, and that's what recenters the plug. And then the housing is also entirely cast, so again that's split chambers except for right down at the base for all 3 of them. And then it also has this very strange groove. I have no idea why it's there. Perhaps it's an artifact of the casting process, but there is nothing at all on the plug that would interact with that groove, and the company produces only 1 cylinder like this, so it's not left over from a different higher security lock. But anyway, that is the plug and the housing. And now, show one of these key pins again. Pretty standard, relatively well machined for a standard pin. And then one of the tiniest spools that are relatively deep as well. They are beveled on the ends, so they're not super hard to set, but they will tilt very far over in the chambers and give all of that counter rotation we were seeing. All right. Go close up on those. Yep. So, 18 chambers, 18 pins, 18 spools, and they are very, very crowded up at the top of the lock. Plus, it'll also relock on you halfway around, and you have to worry about not letting all of those drivers and springs escape into the keyway as you go past it. So, while it is a relatively loose tolerance, low-cost lock, they're still challenging to pick, and they're also pretty fun to pick because you get lots of good feedback. So, if you're looking for high pin count Japanese locks, this is a good one to pick up if you're ordering. All right, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.